You ready? Okay. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and if we could get everybody to stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Let it be noted that all commissioners are present. And we will go to Peter if there's any agenda changes for today.
No changes, just an announcement that item 2, E2, and Julie made her grand entrance. E9 and E10 will be continued, but we'll need to take action on, well, 9 and 10 have been announced in the agenda that they will be continued to November 2nd. We'll need to take up item E2, and we're going to request it be continued to a date certain. So we'll get to that when the time comes.
Okay. So before we start public comment period, there's not many people here yet, so I'm probably going to have to announce this twice today. We have a very, very stacked agenda today. I would like to make it kind of clear that today we're going to stay on track with our 15-minute presentations from staff, as well as any appeals or projects that we have going forward. If there is new information being presented during that 15 minutes, obviously I'm willing to continue to let it go. But if it appears that the 15-minute program is repeating the same information over and over, I am going to stay strict on the 15 minutes today. So on that note, let's go to public comment. I do know we have at least one here that wants to speak.
I hurried just to be with you folks today, and it's always good to see you. First off, I would like to say I'm very sorry for anybody that was negatively affected because of the positions they took, board members, regarding cannabis, marijuana. I think that that's just horrible. And it was, as you remember, the reason I said I will not speak about the issue at that time, because things do get testy with, I know the county quite well. There's a book written by the Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. It's called The Art of Living, and about two-thirds of the way through it, I came across a passage that says, in order to be truly happy in your future, you must be active in your present. You must be involved in your present. And I closed the book and I thought about that, and then I wrote him a letter. And in that letter I told him, well, you've never been to Calaveras County. It's very hard to be, it's very hard to work in the present at times, and whether it's going to have an effect on my future is questionable. Recently, 2 months ago in Calaveras County, or in West Point, the epicenter of marijuana growing, we lost ambulance service. We no longer have ambulance service. The reason given by an EMT, an emergency, was that they just thought it was too dangerous, the associated impacts of marijuana growing in the region, and they couldn't find people to stay there for the period, their 12-hour shifts. So we have an ambulance that comes from as far away as Jackson or San Andreas, taking us out of the 1 hour, golden hour it's called, and leaving our population, which is by and large elderly, out of luck, vulnerable. Recently there was a Board of Supervisors meeting, and in that it was requested that that there would be a zone called Rancho Calaveras, an area called Rancho Calaveras that would not have any marijuana grows in it. What did I call it? I'm always better in writing than I am in speaking. I don't have anything written for you. But I'd like to see that for the West Point area too, from the Licking Fork to the North Fork of the McCullummy River is basically scattered residences, and only a few, I think 2, that can be counted on a small parcel, a small portion of the parcel maps, zones that would be applicable to the ordinance and will allow marijuana growing. But I don't want to see any up there at all. The people have been so negatively affected that it would be a slap in their face. I do have a concern about you putting it in general forestry as well. General forestry and timber production are two areas that we set aside for that purpose, not marijuana growing, for actual timber harvesting and replanting. When I saw that, knowing all the trouble I've had to go through with other projects when it comes to timber production and having them properties rezoned, I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't feel comfortable with that. So if you can take that out, an exclusionary zone for West Point is what I'm asking for marijuana, and forest production, TPZ or general forest to be taken out as well. Gary's a friend, Gary Tofinelli. I've known him a long time, and I do see a great deal of merit in what he is recommending. So, thank you very much. You guys did a fantastic job the other day when you worked on the ban and the ordinance. You're very diligent. What came forward was very concise, and I appreciated what you did. Being completely honest with you when I say that. Thank you. Peter, special thank you to you for putting up with us, all of us in this county. Okay? Especially me. Please take care. I know you have a busy agenda today. I have some wood to cut, and I will go back to that. Good
Thank
day.
you. Are there any other public speakers for items that are not on today's agenda? No? Okay. Is the timer working today, Annette?
I'm sorry, I forgot.
That's okay.
I'm sure it is.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure, because that could have gone too long. So we are going to now go to our consent agenda. No, we're not? Well, none. The word none there. Okay, we'll move into public hearings. Number one is our extension of time approval for TSTM Calaveras Business Park, and Gina, looks like you're presenting that.
Indeed. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'll try to be quick. Keep
You
us
have
on,
15
keep
minutes.
us on our.
You have 15 minutes.
Okay. I think I can do this. So what you have before you today is a request for an extension of time for the Calaveras Business Park. Mr. Lawrence Vosti, Vosti Properties is the owner and developer of the subdivision. The request is for a 3-year discretionary extension. The map was actually approved back in 2004 by the Board of Supervisors. They approved a 23-lot subdivision, which is proposed to be a business park. The parcels are zoned, or will be zoned M4 to accommodate that. In 2007, the owner came in and requested and was granted a 3-year extension. In addition to the 3-year extension, 7 years worth of state automatic extensions were granted to this particular map. The developer over time actually had obtained the majority of their state and federal permits, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Fish and Wildlife, Regional Water Quality Control. All those permits for the purpose of submitting their improvement plans had been obtained, but due to the kind of the downfall of the economy and the fact that there was no market to support the project, the improvement plans were not submitted and those permits subsequently expired. So now the developer has retained professional assistance through RFE. They're a registered, they're an engineering firm out of Sacramento, and they are currently working on the improvement plans. In addition, he has retained Moore Biological to continue the re-permitting, continued to commence that process through the state and federal agencies once again to obtain all those necessary permits, or I should say reattain those necessary permits so they can go ahead and submit their improvement plans. So the work that's done today is viewed by staff to be substantial enough to grant the 3-year extension, meeting that requirement for a good faith effort. At this point, there were originally we had approved and under CEQA we had approved a negative declaration. At this point, we see no changes to the circumstances that would necessitate either revision to that document and or recirculation of that document. So we are recommending approval of the last 3-year discretionary extension. And again, this is the final discretionary extension. After the 3 years is up, if you grant it, that's all they will have left on this map.
I have a question.
Yes.
And I might have missed what you just said. On page 2 of the resolution, it says it was a mitigated negative declaration. At page 3, it says negative declaration.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's a negative declaration.
It is a negative declaration.
Yes. I will make that change.
Do you have more questions? Okay. Is there an applicant present here today for this project? No. Gina, are you aware that they weren't going to be here?
No.
Well, then I have another question for you.
Okay.
Do you happen to know if they've, I'm concerned with a CCWD letter saying that they've
Right.
shown no contact.
Right.
Do you have any
So
elaboration
kind of how
on
the
that?
process works is, everything that every permit that you get is going to ultimately have an expiration. So for them to enter into concept approval and actual agreements, that, just like the other permits, will expire if, in fact, you don't take it to the next step. So really, your water and sewer connection services are some of the last things that you do. Their main focus at this point, and the initial point of this process, is to actually obtain those state and federal permits for the purpose of submitting your improvement plans to the Public Works Department. Then you will start to see things like your encroachment permit from Caltrans if needed, in addition to those other permits and agreements such as water and sewer.
So the fact that there's been no contact with CCWD doesn't necessarily show that they're not making a good faith effort to...
Correct. So in the original approval of the map, they did get an acceptance from CCWD saying they would be able to serve. And so as far as I am to understand, that is still the case, that they are not, that they are still in the ability to serve water and sewer to the parcel. There isn't an issue. It's just a matter of going through, like I said, the concept approval and the subsequent agreements.
So there had been contact at one point.
Initially in the beginning, yes.
Okay.
Just not recently. In
Right.
terms, I probably should have explained that a little bit better. They just simply have not gone through that final agreement process.
Okay, and that makes sense in that this is referring to particular conditions of approval.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
It's a little difficult trying to get comments from agencies. Sometimes with these extensions, they don't quite understand what we're looking for. And so, it generally takes subsequent phone calls and some follow-up to kind of clarify things with the commenting or the conditioning agencies.
Thank you.
So the letter for the Department of the Army stating that they want, that it's expired,
Yes.
same thing? They're going to have to...
Yeah, so they have to reissue those permits. So they basically have to start that process over again. There's been enough time that's lapsed between the last conversation that I had with the owner and today, that I would imagine that they've probably gotten the wetland delineation done. They were just right on the verge
Okay.
of completing that document for submittal, and they had already commenced the permit process through those agencies. So it's just a matter of putting all of that together and getting the permits issued. But at the last correspondence that I had had with the applicant and their agents, they had not actually obtained those permits. They had already commenced the second round of process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any indication from the water district that there's going to be any problem supplying the water?
No, I spoke to Robbie Creamer, and he did not indicate there would be any problems with service. As a matter of fact, I needed to clarify their whole process just to make sure I had it clear in my mind. And that's basically just, as I explained earlier, their process starts with a concept approval, and then subsequent agreements for service. And then there's an expectation that improvements are going to happen subsequent to that agreement. And until they're actually ready to make those improvements for that service, they generally don't enter into that agreement. So as before, if you could enter into it too soon, then those could in fact expire, and then you would have to start all over again.
So as far as you know, the water district isn't
They've
reconsidering the
No.
ability to supply water no matter whether we have a drought or not. It's just not on their
Correct.
table.
Yeah, there's no indication from the water district that they are, that there's any other consideration than what was originally approved through the map.
Well, Gina, I was very surprised when we didn't have anybody here for the developer, but you've done a great job of filling
I'm
everything
frankly
in.
a little surprised too, because I've had numerous, email correspondence with both the owner and the agent with RFE. So I'm frankly a little surprised that they're not here.
Well, let's
So
hope
if we were to
everything-
reduce it to 1 year,
I guess that's their tough luck.
But then we'd see it again.
Any further questions? Okay, well, let's take some public comment on this then. Does anybody have any public comment on this project? Seeing none, we'll close the public portion of this and bring it back to the commissioners for deliberation.
I just would rather see some sort of input from the water district, an affirmative input in writing. The way they wrote the letter, it implied
I agree.
Something's amiss, but we don't care, or I don't know what they're saying. So,
Yeah, and that's what caused the subsequent phone conversation I had with Robbie Creamer, is because I just wasn't, I too was not exactly clear as to what that meant. But it just simply means that they just have not entered into those agreements, but it does not mean that they are not capable of serving the subdivision.
And he said that.
Yes, yeah, Robbie Creamer.
And there had been an earlier indication that there would be no problem supplying the water.
Correct,
They just have to work out the conditions and the improvements.
correct.
Okay.
Well, I would be okay with the CCWD issue because this is on the applicant. They're the ones spending the money to do all this further work.
Exactly.
And they're the ones that would want to go directly to CCWD to make sure that all issues are resolved before
Right.
spending a whole lot of money.
Well, and if for some reason something happens between now and the end of, say, 3 years, if they're not able to serve the subdivision, then they don't get a chance to
Right.
record the map, and it goes
Right.
away.
Right. Do you have any further questions? Commissioner Sisk?
No, I just have an issue with another 3 years, so this has just been on the books for a long time.
They
Yeah.
get,
This is the last discretionary, 3 years of discretionary extension. So after this, they have no more.
in the economic downturn, we had a whole lot of projects go down and rely on the state's ability to extend.
Right.
I think it was 7 years is
Yeah, they
Yeah,
they
so-
actually were eligible for 7 years of extension.
I think with the economy ticking up, we're going to see a whole lot more projects that took advantage of that 7-year downturn coming back to
Right.
us, is what my feeling is.
We're seeing that come through.
Yeah. we're hearing it too, just through the real estate, industry
Yeah.
development is people are ready to kick back up on their projects, so.
I'm just concerned that there is no question about the water supply. It boggles my mind that the water district hasn't said something, one way or the other, to relook at this thing. These are all industrial, right, M40?
It's all zoned M4, yes.
And do you know where the water would be coming from?
I don't know where the next stub out is. I mean, I
No, but I mean, what's the source? It's not
Oh.
wells, is it, or?
No,
no, I don't think it would be Wallace. I'm
No,
not
well-
exactly sure
wells,
of their
sorry.
infrastructure, yeah. But it is, well, CCWD, but where exactly
Right.
it's coming from, I'm not certain,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
no, Tree Branch.
The water issue is a challenge that we sort of constantly face, the local government versus the water district. The district does not want to commit to providing water to a project until there actually is the demand. We have to make an effort to identify that there is sufficient water resources available to serve the project, but the district will not commit to it. And it could be something where you have multiple projects going on at one point in time, and the district will say, and it's not just CCWD, it's every district, we can serve you now, but we don't know what might come in the interim, and it may be that by the time you do your project, we've developed, other projects, and our resources have all been used up, and you're going to have to wait. Many counties and cities have struggled with this when you have a separate entity providing sewer and water service, and particularly water service, because it is a finite resource. And if you don't have the water rights, or the rights is the biggest issue. The infrastructure can always be built up to serve it. But if you don't have the storage capacity or the actual rights to serve the development, there is sort of a chicken and egg problem. What comes first? You actually have the water there committed to it. The districts are not going to want to commit to a project that may or may not get built. This was approved, over 10 years ago, and if they had said, okay, we're going to set aside this water and no one else can use it until this project comes in, or until it goes away, then that ties up their resources that they can't then sell to some other developer that comes in. So we're always sort of trying to struggle with that sort of timing issue with a true commitment. Some jurisdictions will require that the developer actually has to purchase the meters at the time of the final map, and so that we won't end up recording what might be considered a dry lot. That has happened here in the past, where a map gets recorded and then the water district doesn't have the water to actually serve that project, and they can't issue water meters for these lots, and they're basically useless lots. We want to make sure that doesn't happen. But particularly at the tentative map stage, we don't know if those projects will ever get built. And so we rely on the district to say, we have the capacity now to serve it, we can make the infrastructure work, but it's going to depend on the time they come in for their final map for actual commitment to serve the project.
But they've already indicated that first step, that they...
Yes.
If this happened back in 2004, they had the water, and...
And Gina's conversation with the CCWD staff said we can serve it today as well. We didn't get it in writing from them, unfortunately, but we did have a verbal commitment that they
Wasn't
can.
the water an issue a couple years ago when he subdivided this property for where the AutoZone is now? The part the AutoZone is on was under PUD, and the other part of the property was the CCWD. Wasn't that an issue a couple years ago?
Yes, the district boundary cuts through the remainder parcel of this property. And the reason that remainder parcel was cut out from the rest of the subdivision is because that was the boundary of the water district.
I remember that.
So if we limited this to 1 year, probably they're not going to get all the other permits done in the 1 year, right?
That whole process is very lengthy.
Yeah, so that we would be, we could
I
maybe
would-
get a personal assurance from the water district, but that nothing more will have happened with the water district
Right.
after 1 year.
I would imagine that if you only granted a one-year extension, that 1 year from now, he would be back in with another request to extend the map.
And it'll cost him more fees.
Right.
For me, the water isn't really much of an issue because the risk is on the applicant. If 3 years from now, the CCWD does not commit to these meters and the water for them, their map doesn't get recorded. So the risk isn't on the county, it's on the applicant. They've got to provide that to record these maps.
Correct.
So I don't have an issue going the 3 years. I mean, I don't see any reason for them to come back here next year and ask for the same extension and have to pay more fees. I want to be a friendly county and say, hey, get your project done.
Well, just further to that, one of the conditions to record the map is a written statement from a public water or sanitation district indicating they're going to provide water and sewer.
Exactly.
If that condition isn't met, they don't record. So that's what you just said is correct.
Thank you.
And supported by, supported
Yeah,
by
it's
the
an actual
condition.
condition on the map, on the
condition.
original resolution.
Just so everyone, just so there's no misunderstanding, under the MAP Act, if there is a requirement that they have that they must provide such a letter, and the district is suddenly out of water and they declare a moratorium, that automatically extends the life of the map for the length of time that the moratorium is in place. I don't think we're in any position that is likely to occur. If we were in a boom time and we were, concerned that the district might be running out of water in certain areas, I think we would probably have more concern over it, that the map could be extended for an additional 5 years if there were to be a moratorium, or whatever the length of that time frame would be, but not to exceed 5 years. But I don't think that we're in the risk of that happening at this stage in time. 2 or 3 years from now could be a different story, but right now I don't see that as being an issue. But it's not that they just suddenly the map dies and they can't do anything. There could be a potential for a moratorium if water were not available. But again, I don't think we're in that situation. There's no indication that they have a short supply of water and that there's more commitment to projects than they can serve at this point.
Well, I am concerned about water, but I've been convinced by the presentation that limiting this to a 1 year extension would probably be just cause them and us more work, in that we wouldn't be close enough to a full resolution after 1 year for the water district to give its final commitment. So I'm favoring 3 years on this one.
I have a question. Do you have the contracts between Vosti Properties and either the biologist or the engineer?
I have invoices only from RFE. I've had contact with RFE. I've had contact with Moore Biological, but I don't actually have a contract, copy of a contract. But I have gotten email correspondence from Diane Moore giving me more or less an outline of where she's at with the process of permit.
The only reason I ask that question is the resolution states that Vosti Properties has contracted with these people. It's clear they've retained them, but
Well,
we don't have the contracts.
okay.
Well, I'm in favor of granting this. I think the resolution could use a little work, but
Going to make suggestions.
Was that a motion?
no.
Okay.
But if we want to go to the resolution, I can tell you what I think should be changed.
Okay? You guys ready to work on the resolution? Yes, okay.
Okay, I think Commissioner Laddish pointed out that the description of the secret document is not consistent between page 1 and page 2, and it actually is a mitigated negative declaration. Is that correct?
It's a negative declaration, so I will change page 1, I believe. Yeah, it's a negative deck. So I'll make the change on paragraph 1, under findings, page 1.
2 places,
Yeah.
Okay.
and the date of the hearing is October 26th.
Oh,
That's 2 places on that also. Both pages. Sorry, Kelly.
My other suggestions would be in paragraph 2 on page 2. It says, based on evidence to public record, a good faith effort has been demonstrated towards meeting conditions of the map. The ordinance uses the phrase in pursuit of, so it might be better to say, a good faith effort has been demonstrated in pursuit of meeting conditions of the map. That tracks the ordinance. And then under the evidence, I think there's a typo where it says the applicant is in the process of obtaining state and federal permits necessary to submit improvement plans of the county. Public Works Department should be to the county. And in the next sentence where it says that Vasti Property is contracted, et cetera, I think it should say Vasti Properties has retained a biologist to update the wetland delineation and an engineer to draft the improvement plans per condition 3-5. And I would add the phrase, because I think the record supports it, comma after 3-5, and work is ongoing on those projects, because that's part of the good faith effort that's been made. They've done more than just retain people. They're working on it.
Good. Everybody good with those changes?
I am.
Okay. And I didn't even catch that date. Good job on that one. Thank you. Okay, so I guess we're ready for Gina to read the recommendation.
Staff recommends the Planning Commission adopt Resolution 2017-0-082, approving a 3-year extension of time for approved vesting tentative subdivision tract map 2002-124, Calaveras Business Park for Vasti Properties, based upon the findings included therein as amended.
Thank you.
Should have included that.
Can I get a motion?
I'll so move.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Okay, thank you, Gina. Number 2, I think Peter wanted to discuss that with us a little bit.
Yes, there have been some last-minute ownership changes, and we are still working on the indemnity agreement. We probably should have had this resolved. Before we set it for hearing, we thought we'd have it resolved in the meantime, but we're close to doing that and would recommend that this be continued to the November 16th meeting.
Okay.
I'm sorry, November 9th.
Right. On that, Peter, I'm concerned, again, with the water, with signing onto a resolution that says there have been no changes necessary for any reconsideration of the environmental impact report. And since we're talking about a pre-drought environmental impact report, and as I recall, there was some question whether any water was going to be supplied to CCWD at one point during the drought, that they were going to be cutting off the water from Lake Tulloch. I think at the hearing it would be nice to get some clarification of what the water situation is, so we can determine whether we are happy with a, whatever it is, 11-year-old environmental impact report.
Staff is prepared to do that at the hearing.
Thank you. if we could have some input from CCWD, it'd probably be.
Sorry, Deborah, could you come up to the mic, please?
Staff is prepared to address any issues associated with water. We're working very closely with CCWD. We are met with their same unwillingness to provide things in writing. We do have verbal assurances, and we have factual information about the water, where it's coming from, how they're currently processing it, and so forth. And we can go through that at the hearing.
Yeah, and I'm concerned with the bigger picture as far as have there been changes in the environment, not necessarily more demands from neighboring parcels, et cetera, that could affect CCWD's initial assurance that there would be water.
Okay.
Yes,
So
we can address
I'm
that.
going to, because we're basically right now discussing whether to continue it or not, I'm going to pull back this conversation, and I'm going to have you contact her directly with your concerns before November 9th. That would be best.
She's assured me I don't need to do that. Thank you.
Oh, wow, you scored. Thank you. Okay, so, go ahead.
Well, I'm just a little bit confused on how this extension works, because we've been given a copy of the government code that covers this matter, and part of it says, prior to the expiration of an approved or conditionally approved tentative map, upon an application by the subdivider to extend that map, the map shall automatically be extended for 60 days or until the application for the extension is approved, conditionally approved, or denied, whichever occurs first. And it appears we're past the 60 days, and so I'm not entirely clear how this works.
That is sort of an anomaly with the MAP Act, and it has been our practice here and practice of most jurisdictions that I'm familiar with, that upon a timely filing, if it is the delay that it takes the county to get it to hearing, that should not be something that the applicant is penalized for. And so we would typically, as long as we're processing that application, the way, in some cases, you can file a map extension, it's automatically extended for a period of 60 days. And during that time, you can record your final map. And so in some cases, a developer is very close to recording the map, needs another month or so to finalize everything, and can record that map during that 60-day time frame. Once that time frame lapses and we haven't actually extended the map, they can't record the final map until we actually extend it. But it doesn't mean the map dies. It just means they can't record the final map during that time frame.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any further discussion on the extension? Continuance, excuse me. Does somebody want to make a motion to continue to the November 9th meeting?
Public comment?
Oh, I'm sorry, we need public comment. Pardon me. Does anybody have any public comment on this? Nope. Okay. Now I'm looking for a motion.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. Passes. Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is item number 3. And looks like Madeline's going to be our presenter on this.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I don't have a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, if you want, she's going to have a 15-minute presentation, and then you're going to get a 15-minute presentation. And before we get started, because there weren't many people in the room when we started today, I did say that we have a whole lot ahead of us this afternoon on appeals. We're going to limit presentations to 15 minutes. If you're still presenting new information, we'll allow more time. But if it is repeating the same conversation in that 15 minutes, we're going to call it and continue on with the hearing.
Okay then.
Okay.
Madeline Flandreau, Planner 2. Today I'm presenting the appeal 2016-943 for Mr. Leslie Denham Newman. On July 11th, 2016, Mr. Denham Newman submitted an application for 22,000 square feet of mixed light commercial cannabis cultivation on a parcel that's located at 2200 Gold Strike Road in San Andreas. This is APN 040-009-041. On September 7th, 2017, the appellant was denied for receiving 2 notices of incomplete notice of intent from the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board, which is a violation of Calaveras County Code Section 17.95.165.n.4. The appellant applied for a Tier 2 on his NOI on August 10th, 2016. A copy of that was submitted to the Planning Department. Subsequently, on September 13th, 2016, a first notice of incomplete notice of intent was sent to Mr. Denham Newman, stating that the Central Valley Water Board staff had determined that the NOI was incomplete as he had selected an incorrect tier size based on the size of disturbance, square footage of disturbance, and distance to a surface water body. A copy of the notice of incomplete was forwarded to the Planning Department. Subsequently, on June 27th, 2017, the Regional Water Board sent the appellant a second notice of incomplete notice of intent, which was also forwarded to Planning, stating, let me quote this, I apologize. And I wanted to quote this directly from the letter so it's clear. Central Valley Water Board staff previously sent a September 13th, 2016 letter informing you that the submitted NOI is incomplete. This is the second notice of incomplete NOI. Please respond within 30 calendar days of the date of this letter to avoid voiding of your application and forfeiture of your application fees. To obtain coverage under the general order, please resubmit a signed NOI with the missing or incomplete information as indicated above, along with a copy of this letter. Please note that if the proposed cultivation site requires enrollment under Tier 2 or Tier 3, a biological site assessment, cultural resources inventory, and site management plan may need to be completed and submitted with the revised NOI. And you can read the additional information there. So, therefore, Mr. Denham Newman was denied on September 7th, 2017 for failure to come into compliance with the Regional Water Board's requirements. As according to planning records, he did not submit a corrected NOI to the Water Board. An appeal of the denial was submitted to the Planning Department on September 21st, 2017. In his appeal letter, Mr. Denham Newman explained that he was in communication with the Regional Water Board in September of 2016 after he had received the first notice of incomplete NOI. According to the Regional Water Board, Tier 3 is defined as cannabis cultivators whose cultivation area and associated facilities are located on greater than 30% slopes, occupy and or disturb more than 1 acre or more than 50% of the cultivators/landowner's parcel, or are within 200 feet of a wetland class 1 or 2 watercourse. In his appeal letter, Mr. Denham Newman stated that he contested the Water Board's determination that his selection of Tier 2 was correct, stating that the cultivation site was not greater than 1 acre and was more than 200 feet away from the North Fork of the Calaveras River. He also stated that he was advised by staff at the time with the Water Board to reapply for Tier 3, however, to withhold payment, and that they would discuss his application at a later date when they got to it, because they were inundated with these. However, the Water Board has no record of a second NOI being submitted by Mr. Denham Newman. So that is what the record shows. And that's my presentation. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, are there any questions?
I have a couple of questions.
Of course.
Have you confirmed the conversations with Trey Cheryl?
Trey Sherrill does not work with the water board anymore. I've been in contact with Mr. Mike Parker, who's been sort of taking over for Trey, and he was not able to find any NOI that was resubmitted.
And currently, the document trail that we have with a staff report would indicate that the water board is still receptive to continuing with an application when it is submitted.
Correct.
Is that your understanding?
Yes,
That
Mr. Parker.
this is still alive with the water board?
Is still alive with the water board, yes. They want to make sure the cultivators are coming into compliance with the general order.
And he specifically said in the September 19th email that the applicant has satisfied the second notice of incomplete. Why are we still claiming the NOI wasn't completed?
The email from Mike Parker, you're saying?
Yes.
I understood that that email was waiving the 30-day requirement to respond because he had not done that. Mr. Denham Newman had not responded within 30 days of that letter, and I understood that email was waiving that 30 days requirement, and that they were still going to work together to determine what documentation was necessary.
And
Well, it's still open. He says it's open. He says, this conversation has satisfied the second notice of incomplete in which the 30 days to respond no longer applies.
so that he can still submit something. My concern is, I thought we had been taking the approach that as long as the water board consultations, negotiations, whatever, were continuing, we did not hold applicants to the September 7th date. That, I thought I'd been educated on that at some point.
So, yes, if there was ongoing conversation and working with the water board, but we'd received 2 notices and there was no record in our file of any ongoing discussion between the water board and the applicant until after we had denied the appeal for an incomplete application. The only communication we had at the time that we denied it was that it was incomplete. 2 notices had been sent, it was incomplete. There was no correspondence that we had, and we confirmed that with the water board that was still an incomplete application. It wasn't until after the denial that the applicant then began working again with the water board.
I have a copy of a letter dated October 23rd of this year requesting an extension of time here on this appeal hearing. Does anybody else have that?
Yeah.
I apologize.
This is a request for a continuance,
Yes.
as I understand it. One would think it might be wise to deal with the request for a continuance before we deal with the merits.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. I don't know why I don't have that email. Did that one you sent out?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So I guess we should see what you have to say about the continuance and speak to Mr. Denham.
I would like to see if the appellant is here. He submitted a letter on October 23rd, 2017, requesting a continuance, date unspecified, but it says, this letter serves as my official request for an extension of my appeal hearing scheduled for October 26, 2017. I am requesting this extension to afford me the necessary time to secure counsel and to allow said counsel the ability to research and prepare for the hearing. So maybe if the appellant wants to.
Okay, do you want to come up and speak to that? Just to the continuance, please.
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, so I feel that there may be information specific to my situation that someone who is a legal professional might be able to provide me. I've been trying very hard for the last couple of weeks to find a lawyer to like get involved with this. I haven't found anybody in the county with specific knowledge about the cannabis regulations here or specific or knowledge about the water board who's willing to engage. So I'm not sure if I will be able to find a lawyer, but it's my hope that I am and that they would be able to provide me assistance.
How much time are you requesting?
A month would be nice. I'm not sure when your guys, I heard there was one meeting on November 9th. I'm not sure when the meeting after that is. But
Actually, then it's in December.
Yeah, I think it was December 19th, it was Tuesday.
Oh, is there? Yeah, you're right. Well, one meeting is, normal meeting date falls on Thanksgiving, I know that.
Second, 9th, 16th.
I don't think we meet because here I have it.
December 14th would be the first meeting in December.
Okay, did you contact attorneys and nobody wants to take your case, or they're not?
I've left probably 24 voicemails. I've actually talked to 3 different attorneys, 2 of which did not want to get involved. One of which was willing to, and then upon research of his qualifications and previous customers, I decided not to go with him.
So what guarantees would we have that someone would even take your case? That
There are no
concerns me.
guarantees. I have no guarantees that I will be able to secure counsel.
Have you been in further contact with the water board in the last 2 weeks?
Since the email with Mike Parker, I talked to Mike Parker that day, and then he emailed right after that. I'm fully prepared to move forward with becoming compliant, and I've secured a environmental consultant to do all the biological site assessment and cultural resources inventory. But I've just been waiting on this appeal to determine whether or not it's $20,000 for the consultant, so that's not something I can afford to do without knowing that I'll be able to move forward with the county.
Okay. If we decided to hold your hearing today, do you have new evidence for us that's not in this board packet?
No, I think the information is pretty clear. I have a slightly different presentation of how the events went down than Madeline does, but no, I don't dispute any of the information.
Okay. All right. So, want to take public comment? Okay. We're going to go ahead and take public comment and see if anybody has any public comment on this continuance.
My name is Jim Rott. I live at 2150 Gold Strike, which is part of 2200 Gold Strike, so we are the landowners. We have had nothing but whenever we needed help or whenever anything was due us or so forth, we were always treated honestly and fairly.
Okay,
And-
I have to stop you for just 1 second because we're not holding the hearing yet. What we're doing is deciding whether or not to do a continuance. So what you would need to speak to is whether or not you want us to have the hearing today or not.
I'm asking for
Huh? Continuance.
Okay,
Sorry.
Catch on fast.
thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. All right, is there any further public comment? Okay, so no further public comment? Okay, I will close public.
Well, I have a question for the
Yes.
applicant.
Yes.
Are you cultivating now?
Yes.
Have you harvested yet?
We're doing a lot of light deprivation, so it's kind of a continuous harvest. I'm in the process of harvesting. Not complete.
When do you think you'll be complete?
Probably beginning of December, maybe first week of December or so.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to bring it back to the commissioners to deliberate on whether or not they want to give a continuance or hold the hearing today. Your thoughts?
The request for continuance came in after the time that we provided for that in our new procedures, is that right?
I don't think there was a time limit on when they could make a request for that.
Oh, I thought,
I don't know, I don't remember addressing
there was.
that.
I don't recall. I think I agree with Chair Muditis that we don't have, I mean, again, we can request a continuance at any time. The only difference would be that if they ask it before we notice it, then we can accommodate that at staff level. Otherwise, you need to make the decision whether to continue or not.
but, and I don't have our procedures right before.
I do,
Um,
right here, she's got it, I
we've
just
got
read it.
Stuff having to do with request in order to get counsel.
They technically could just show up here and ask for a continuance, they don't even have to do it ahead of time. Does any other commissioners have questions while he's reading that?
No. We have expressed concern in the past that for an application that has been denied and continue to cultivate, that the continuance requests are just a delaying tactic to allow the crop to be harvested. You know, at this point in time, it's later in the season. If it were to be acted upon today and a subsequent appeal filed to the board, it's sort of moot at this point as far as trying to stem, continued cultivation when the project has been denied. So I don't have, just as soon get the hearing over with, but it's up to you. I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other on it.
I do notice that under continuances, we have an applicant's request for a continuance shall be filed pursuant to section 2 above. And section 2 above says it be filed no later than 5 p.m. on the Monday before the hearing with the clerk. And this was filed on Tuesday?
Yes, it was.
Well, it just says that they will be forwarded electronically if they're filed by then. It doesn't have restrictions. It would be forwarded
It
electronically.
has to be filed. Written comments shall be filed no later than 5 p.m. on the Monday before the hearing of the clerk. Okay? And the request for a continuance shall be filed pursuant to section 2 above, which is this.
Okay. May be filed, doesn't say shall be, it says
That's right.
may be.
That was a mistake.
Okay,
I don't think it would be appropriate that, if someone had a sudden emergency and they needed a
Well, that's-
continuance.
But that's provided for in here, and unless we're convinced that the circumstances were different and everything else.
And I think it's within your discretion to grant the continuance
You
or
can come
not.
up to the mic.
Just, whether you think it's an appropriate reason for continuance in this case. And it's clearly within your discretion to grant it or to continue with the appeal hearing today.
the appellant had something to say, and I'd like to hear what it was.
Yeah, I sent the email with the letter at 12:09 p.m. on Monday,
Thank you,
October 23rd.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so, back to deliberations here. I am perfectly okay with having this hearing today because there isn't any further information, and we continue continuances and continue backlogging and adding extra days to our schedule and extra work for staff. So I'm prepared to have the hearing today. So if I could poll all of you and find out what your positions are.
I'm ready to go ahead.
Okay, that's 3.
I wouldn't mind continuing it because I would probably ask Mr. Maurer to reconsider this denial, but that's not
Well-
necessarily saying I want the continuance.
Right, that's, but we're going to get to the merits.
So I'm ambivalent.
That's okay. While you were gone, I said that you were abstaining and you were actually absent, so it's,
You didn't hear I went to the Iron Man?
I guess not.
I did.
Commissioner Wooster?
No, I would be in favor of continuing it because he's tried to get a lawyer. He hasn't been able to do it. Looks to me like he probably needs one. And I don't see any harm in granting it.
Okay.
I think he just changed my mind. I'll go with Mr. Wooster's position.
Well, I'm concerned with the continuance. I can certainly see where we continue it now, he continues to harvest, he comes back and he says, gee, I just haven't been able to find an attorney, which is what he's telling us now, and he's not guaranteeing that he'd have an attorney. And I don't think there are any new facts to come before us. When, I certainly intend when he's hearing on the merits, asking him exactly what his status is with the Water Quality Control Board, but I think the continuance will cost us a lot of time, and I don't know it's going to benefit him as far as his hearing goes.
Okay, well, I think just by polling, we've got a 3-2 to go ahead with the hearing. So what I'd like to do is get a motion to continue with the hearing, and then let's take a formal vote instead of just poll.
I'll also move to continue it to December 14th.
Yes.
Okay?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No?
No.
Okay, so 3-2 fails. Means we're having the hearing today. Okay, so I don't know if it is, help me out here, Peter. Madeline already pretty much gave her presentation. Can we continue from there and now go to the applicant, or do we need to go back?
I don't think we need to go back. We can just
Thank
go
you.
straight to the applicant.
Just want to make sure procedurally I'm okay there. Okay, so you're up. We'd like to hear from you on your side of the story. Thank you, Annette.
All right. I believe you all have a letter that I wrote on September 21st, 2017 that gives my account of the timeline of my interactions with the water board and the county. So as Madeline said, back in 2016, after I submitted my first NOI, I received a notice of incomplete because the water board was saying I was tier 3, not tier 2. At that point in time, I called the water board and I spoke probably 2 or 3 times with a gentleman named Trey Sherrill, discussed the specifics of their contention that I was tier 3. We went back and forth a bunch, and it's really close. It's like they have me at like 195 feet, and I had it at like 203 feet, and I'm out there with a tape measure, and they're doing it by aerial. So I went back and forth with him, and the long story short was he said, look, we're so backlogged, just file a tier 3 NOI, send it in, don't do any of the paperwork or send any of the money in, and when we get caught up, we'll give you a call and we'll address your application then. So that was 2016. I didn't hear anything back from the water board until I got a second notice in July or June or July. I got a second notice from the water board. At that time, I began calling Michael Parker, the designated contact on the letter from the water board. The letter literally says, call Michael Parker. Left him, I believe, 3 voicemails. Never heard anything back from him. And to be honest, I didn't take it that seriously at that time. I wasn't getting any response from the water board, and I was moving forward with other compliance issues with the county, with permits for my hoops and electrical and all the grading and all that. And then I got a denial letter from planning. And that took me by surprise. I came in and spoke to Madeline. First day I came in, gave her the breakdown of my you know, what I've been doing over the last year with the water board. She then asked me to send her an email giving the whole timeline. I did. At that point, she reached out to Michael Parker, and I think over the next week, I emailed Madeline every single day almost, asking her if she'd gotten in contact with Michael Parker. To no avail, she hadn't. After a week, Michael Parker called me and left me a voicemail, which I still have, saying he apologizes for never returning my call. And then we spoke at length about the specifics of the property and the project. And, you know, at that point, I kind of, we determined together that it wasn't so much the proximity to the river, which in my previous conversations with Trey Sherrill, that was the important matter, but the other issue being that the total occupied area of the project was over an acre. I was under the impression that it was just like the garden itself was what was considered, but he told me that it's actually all areas associated with the project and even access to the project. So like any roads leading over to the project or anything like that. So that being the matter, I'm over an acre, I'm sure. So at that point, he wrote the email. I talked to him and I discussed with him my options for moving forward with the water board and getting in compliance with them. And then he wrote the email over to Madeline, or to me, and he CC'd Madeline on it. As some of you already said, I thought at that point I was going to be able to move forward, and I somewhat expected my application denial to be rescinded at that point. It didn't. It was not sufficient for the planning department. And so that's where we find ourselves here. I have been very committed to this whole process from the very beginning. I've taken care of all other permits and regulations that I've had to. I would ask Madeline to attest to whether or not I've been communicative and responsible with her. Like I said, I've already secured an environmental consultant, and I'm ready to move forward with that and I have her proposal here if anybody would like to see it. But I'm ready to satisfy the requirements and move forward.
You have a proposal with who?
Eastside Environmental, would you like to see?
And that's for your biology? Or
Yeah, it's for cultural resource inventory and biological site assessment.
We'd like a copy of that. How many do you have? Just one?
I have two.
You have two?
Yeah.
We
Am I
need
allowed to?
7. Okay. Get it. Let everybody look at it and bring it down to you. Okay. Yeah. Okay, is there anybody in the public that would like to see a copy of that? No? Okay, thank you. Okay, anything further you want to add?
No, I mean, the basic gist of it is I made, like, I tried really hard with the water board. I made many attempts to communicate with them, and I feel like I got misinformation from one employee and no communication from another employee. I understand that they're probably really overwhelmed. As I understand it, there's like one person dealing with this. I'm not sure if this is a requirement for other counties throughout the state as well. But as I understand it, there's one guy doing this, so I can imagine he's really busy. That's about it.
Okay.
I have a question
Yes.
on when last September you were told, or around that time, you were told, well, submit an application, don't have to have the other paperwork, and so we'll
Yeah.
just, but you did not.
No, I did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I did, in
Yeah, but that-
late October.
But they apparently have no...
Yeah, so I talked
record
to
of it.
Michael Parker when I spoke to him 3 weeks ago. They had no, basically they had no information on me. They had no information on communication I'd had with Trey Sherrill, even though I talked to him many times. They had no information on, my contesting their determination of the site tier or anything like that. They basically had no information whatsoever.
So you submitted an application?
Yeah.
As was suggested.
Yeah.
That wasn't clear from our packet, so that's key.
I found that and I emailed it over to Madeline a couple weeks ago. I could
I
find.
believe that was on September 19th. So, you have more questions?
I just want to make clear that if we were to grant your appeal today, that does not mean that you can't be denied again.
Absolutely, I understand.
If the chain of communications with the Water Quality Control Board breaks down.
Yeah, no, or if I wasn't compliant with any other numbers of the regulation here, yeah, I understand.
What do you think the slope of your land is?
10 to 15. It's not, it's an easy walk uphill.
So do you have terracing on your garden going towards the waterway?
Yes.
Last year with all the water and rain, did you have any mudslides or flooding going in that direction towards the water?
No. No significant runoff or soil displacement or anything like that.
Did you have wattles or anything?
Yeah, straw wattles at the base of the garden along the fence line.
I finally found out what a wattle was.
You're showing off.
I was a landscape contractor for the majority of my adult life. I'm very familiar with SWIP, stormwater, pollution prevention plans, straw wattles, silt fences, all that stuff.
Okay, I kind of have a specific question for you, Madeline. On September 19th, Michael Parker writes, "This conversation has satisfied the second notice of incomplete in which the 30 days to respond no longer applies." And then you, on the 21st, wrote an email that says, "Unfortunately, Mr. Parker did not waive the second notice. He waived the requirement that a response be made within the 30 days of the date of the second notice." Can you explain that a little bit? Because I don't read it that way, so I'm kind of confused by how you've interpreted it, and I need your help with that one.
I understand your confusion. I think the way that he worded it is really not clear, and I don't know what their process is. It sounds to me like he's waiving the 30 days, that he's still incomplete. There's still a second notice of incomplete. He still needs to move forward with securing a consultant and getting all the surveys done. But the fact that he did not respond within the 30 days from that letter, he was waiving that.
Do you not believe that the phone calls that he made over and over again and then Trey left could have, actually he was trying to and then he couldn't get responses back from the water board? Because there's such a trail here. I mean, at least I'm seeing a trail of notifications that he's trying to reach Trey. He has people's names. He
Yes.
then gets turned over to Michael Parker, and I can see evidence of you trying to talk to Michael Parker and not getting responses as well.
Right.
So I have some concerns that he tried
Yes.
and they didn't respond because they're overwhelmed. I just, this one bothers me.
Yeah.
The
And-
other sentence that should apply is the after we receive the required documentation, we can move forward with the permitting process. It's still open in their mind, according
Yeah.
to that letter.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't see it the way you did. Sorry.
No.
I know, I'm struggling with it too, so.
If I may, the Water Board has a totally different policy objective than us.
Right.
Their idea is to help everyone come into compliance with the general order to prevent environmental damage. And as long as that takes, that's what they do. They don't have exacting deadlines like we do. And it also would point out that I just asked Madeline, and I did not know this either, but we were not aware that he had submitted a notice of an NOI for a Tier 3 in October of 2016. We didn't know that. We thought that here we are in 2017 and that he had never done that. And I don't believe we have any record that he did that.
Do we have a copy?
Do you have a copy?
I believe so.
Isn't it in our packet?
No.
I thought I seen it.
Yeah.
No, the copy of the NOI that's in the packet is the original NOI that was submitted
Yeah.
back in
But
August
I
of
thought there was
2000.
one here where he did, maybe it was in the letter he wrote that I'm recognizing that, never mind.
And yes, I apologize, he did email me a copy of the NOI that he's stating that he submitted in late October of 2016. However, I have no proof that it was submitted to the water board. And the water board is stating that they never received it, so I wasn't really sure how to proceed.
And the
Or
last
are they
date
stating that
they're
they-
saying, yeah.
Are they stating that they have no record of it?
Right.
Because from what we're hearing today about the water board, there may be some paper in there that they're not keeping track of.
Correct.
Well, the address on this is different than the address on the original one.
On the form itself?
Sorry, Mr. Ladish, do you have the contract?
Yeah, under
Did it
2
ever
forms,
make it to
which
you?
you should
No.
probably look at. The address on this one is 2150 Gold Strike Road, and the other one is 2050 and 2200 Gold Strike Road.
I'm sorry.
It's one parcel, two sections.
I'm sorry, can you please, we prefer that you come up to the mic. Can't have you speaking from the chairs.
Are you talking about the landowner information, the address?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right, it's the landowner.
It should be the same parcel, one single parcel, 40-10-34. No.
Well, 2150 and 2200 are one ownership.
Contiguous property.
Yeah.
Always nice to have the owner here to say that.
Thank you.
These were dated 10/19, start 2016, 10/18, 10/18, 10/18, and 10/20 of 2016 also. That's the copy of the new one. You have this one. Maybe that was him.
So you did the second one in 2016, huh?
Yeah, 2016, yeah. After my initial discussions with Trey Sherrill, he told me, I was very skeptical about doing that because I thought it was kind of like an admission of guilt, and that I was Tier 3. But he assured me that once they got their backlog cleared up, that we could discuss the details of my site further, and this would just satisfy some boxes for him at the time, checking some boxes.
And you never returned a copy of this into the county, correct?
No, I did not. At that time, I hadn't gotten any correspondence from the county requiring an updated NOI, so I was just dealing with the water board, you know.
Could I ask a question of the landowner, please? Sorry to keep you popping up and down. Your signature appears on this, this application that, well, I think it's your signature, on this application from October 18th, 2016, that Mr. Denham Newman submitted to the Water Quality Control Board. Do you remember this document from back then?
Yeah.
And that was, it was that date, it was, not that
I don't
specific date, but
remember
I
what the
mean,
date
it was late last year
Yeah.
that it was submitted? All right, thank you. And that's the document that Trey
Yeah,
Sherrill suggested you send in.
yes.
So are you sure the water board has this? Because when Madeline sent emails to them, they never documented this saying they received it.
I'm not sure they have that. When I asked Michael Parker about it, he said they did not have that. No.
But they might have received it, is what you're saying. I mean,
Yeah.
you sent it to them.
I sent it, you know.
Okay, but since the time you sent in that Tier 3 application in October of last year, until recently, you didn't do anything to get the biological assessment of the cultural resources inventory, and that's because Sherrill told you to hold off on it, is that correct?
Yeah, and there was also a bit more misinformation from Trey Sherrill. He told me that I was exempt from biological site assessment and cultural inventory because the property was previously used as cattle grazing lands. I found out subsequently, talking to Michael Parker, that that's not the case, that I still need to get those surveys done regardless.
Okay, and when did you finally get the correct information that you needed those surveys?
When Michael Parker got back to me a month ago, you know, late September.
And then how long after that did you retain the consultants to do the work?
I first emailed her, I mean, within a week or two. Let me see when I first emailed her.
Ethan, could you tell us the date on that, please?
Of the signatures?
The date of the contract for biological
Oh.
survey. Date of signature.
So October 11th is when she sent that to me. I probably talked to her first a week before that. Probably took her a week to get the proposal over to me.
This is signed by the client on October 19th, 2017.
When you spoke with Michael Parker?
Lisa, can you turn your mic on, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. When you spoke with Michael Parker, have you resubmitted your Tier 3 application to him? Or are you just assuming he still has it?
Well, he told me he didn't have it. And as I understand, I need to submit the biological site assessment and the cultural resources inventory with payment as well. And I've basically been waiting for this hearing to determine whether or not I am going to be able to move forward.
Okay, so I'm a little bit confused now, so help me with some clarity
Okay.
here. That Tier 3 application that you filled out and is signed by everybody, the Water Resource Board doesn't have a copy of it, the county doesn't have a copy of it, but Michael Parker is saying he's waiving your 30 days and continuing, why?
My application is still open with them, and they're waiting to receive my Tier 3 documents. You know, and this is just a huge financial investment for me to move forward with the Tier 3 compliance. It's $20,000 for the consultant, $7,500 for the water board.
But
and
if you
that's-
had done that already, we wouldn't be here today.
I was informed by the water board that I didn't need to do that. I mean, I've pretty much done everything that anybody has ever told me to do, regardless of what department. I've moved forward with it expeditiously and done my best to satisfy everything.
Let me just back up just one second, because I'm trying to follow your timeline here. It was really well written, and thank you for that. It's nice to see good documentation. But in June of 2017, you were noticed a second time that they did not have your Tier 3 application. Back in June, you could have submitted the Tier 3 application with the money and the biological assessment contract going forward, and we wouldn't be here because you did not have a denial back then.
I understand.
So what you've done by not complying in June of 2017 has caused yourself a denial from our county. Had you followed through in June, what was the reason for not following through back then? You can't say it was because you got a denial, because you didn't have one back then.
Yeah, no, I reached out. I left voicemails for Michael Parker in June, as soon as I got the second notice. That's when I began leaving voicemails for him.
When's the first time you heard from Michael Parker after receiving the letter in June?
A week after I got the denial letter, and I went into...
So you did not hear back
I
from
never
him
heard
from
from
June until September?
Never heard back from him. No. No.
I've got a couple questions.
Yes.
Do you agree now that your site is properly classified as Tier 3?
Yes. As I understand the Water Board rules and regulations now, I believe it is Tier 3.
Based on the size of the site, is that
Yeah.
correct? And it exceeds 1 acre.
Yeah, The
And that's
whole site.
because they measure the total area of the disturbed earth and cultivation-related areas and facilities such as storage containers and water tanks.
Correct.
And if you look at the form for Tier 3, it says that cannabis cultivators whose cultivation areas and associated facilities are located on greater than 30% slopes occupy and/or disturb more than 1 acre or more than 50% of the cultivator's land or within 200 feet of a wetland, that qualifies.
Yeah,
And so it should have, why wasn't it clear to you when you filled out your initial application where you checked Tier 2?
I
that you
originally,
were over 1 acre based upon the language of this application?
well, my original understanding of it was that it was disturbed earth. But as I've later come to be informed, it's anywhere that you are. So there, we have water tanks and storage containers and stuff, but we have not done any bulldozing over there or anything. We just put them there. And as I originally, I thought it was anywhere that you move dirt around. That was considered disturbed area. And so we are definitely not over 1 acre with that. You know, I mean, the garden is the only place where there's been earth moving, and that's a 1/2 acre or just under, you know, and the surrounding access to it. And that was, and Trey Sherrill last year never brought that up. It was all, when we discussed, we had probably 3 phone calls, and we were always discussing just the distance to the Calaveras River, just the North Fork. Those are the only things we ever talked about.
Well, the initial denial letter, though, was on 2 grounds, wasn't it? Size and proximity to a water course?
Yeah,
And this form does say it's cultivation areas and associated facilities, and it does say if it occupies and/or disturbs. So it's not just disturbed.
Commissioner Vicelli, do you have anything more you want to add?
No.
Commissioner Ladish?
Nope.
Okay, is it okay with you if we take public comment now?
that's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Oh, that's not mine.
Is there, yes, now you can come up and speak. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Jim Rott. I live at 2150 Goldstrike Road. My sister Kitty lives at 2200 Goldstrike, but it's all owned together. I have had nothing but good dealings with these people. When I ask them to do something for me, they're always willing to do it. Matter of fact, I just put in a valve that the county wanted on our water thing for me, so they've always treated me good whenever I've needed anything, or if they ever owed me anything or anything, I always got it on time. And they've always tried to do the best they can because they want to, you know, do things right now. And I hope you can let them continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other comments?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Colleen Platt, myvalleysprings.com. My initial question on this, I think you resolved, but maybe you could clarify that, whether the applicant really did resubmit the Tier 3 application in 2016 after they asked him to after the Tier 2. There was nothing in the packet that covered that, but evidently you have a copy of something that shows that he did submit that, and if you're satisfied that that's a true copy that he submitted that seems to be substantial evidence that he did try to comply with their requirements.
There's no proof that he submitted it. There's proof that the application was filled out.
It's just a copy of an application.
Yes, ma'am.
There's no date of,
No, ma'am.
okay. That was my biggest concern, is if you considered that adequate evidence that he did try to comply with the water board requirements. If you felt he did, exhibited a good faith effort to comply with their requests and that he did follow through as much as possible with emails and phone calls, that's substantial compliance, but that's your call whether you think that's evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. Any further public comment? Okay, we'll close public comment and we will come back to you for any rebuttal that you may have.
I have none.
I do a little bit. This case is not totally dissimilar to a case which Miguel Contreras brought to my attention just a moment ago, and I just looked it up. Mr. Laddish previously indicated that there have been situations in the past whereby we allowed people to miss the September 7th deadline so long as they were in continuous cooperation with the water board. That's not my recollection, but there may be cases that you can point to. But this one is Rocco Rosano, and it's resolution number 2017-064. And one of the findings supporting the denial was simply that the applicant failed to submit all necessary forms, documents to the Central Valley Water Resource Control Board to constitute a complete application by September 7th, 2016. And if the commission wishes to grant this appeal, it seems to me that it needs to make a distinction between that case and this one. Perhaps there's some sort of detrimental reliance on or some other ground.
But we don't, by just quoting that, we don't have the facts of that case again spring to mind.
Yeah.
And I remember at one point when I'm the real neophyte here, and I looked at that September 7th date and I said, well, hey, didn't comply. And, but we've done this and we've done this and we've done this. And I can't cite you the individual cases, but that September 7th date has not been as draconian a date as the ordinance would indicate.
I'd like to speak to that.
wish you
Because
would.
that September 7th date has been very, very strict. What we ruled on that was the opposite and that we approved was the county said they did not have their permit by September 7th. He brought documentation showing that he had his permit well before September 7th, but there was a loss of paperwork being given to the county and what he actually had in his possession. He was able to prove before September 7th he did file and did have his documentation. So there was a difference. He complied, and he had the paperwork, so there were two different issues here. What I'm seeing here, and when you're speaking to Rocco's case, that's completely different for me. The reason that I'm seeing this one differently is, cell phones off, please. What I'm seeing different on this one, I do not believe, Colleen, to answer your question, that he submitted his Tier 3. I think he intended to. It's fully filled out. It's signed by all of the landowners and the applicant, but no date of receiving it. Water Board says they still don't have it. He has admitted at the microphone that they said they don't have it. They need the $20,000. They need his application. I think the $20,000 was part of the issue of holding back. I believe, and then I'm going to say, it's Denham-Newman, so I'm not sure. Mr. Denham, is that the correct way to?
It's legally to the left hand.
Okay. I believe that you've been truthful. I believe that your letter is well documented. I do like the letter that you presented. I think you missed the filing date. I think that when they contacted you in June, you probably should have submitted it. You get a chance to rebuttal what Ethan just, no, right now, it's your turn. I'm over talking and you should be.
I'd also like to make one correction too. Earlier I indicated that we had no record that he had filed the application. However, this was in our file. It just, we had no record that it had been received, and the water board indicated that they had no record that they.
But why wasn't that in our package then?
They're just now getting that
You're talking about the second one, the October.
They had it in
The
the
NOI,
file.
that's correct, this was in your file.
How-
Submitted to me after I had already put together the packet.
Okay, so this was not submitted to you in October of 2016?
Correct.
Okay.
That makes
Just
more
a couple
sense.
weeks ago.
Well, when was the original NOI submitted to the county, a copy of it?
The tier 2?
Yeah.
Tier 2 was way back when.
What date?
Well, my copy doesn't have a date on it. It's not even signed.
I don't know that we have a date stamped copy.
It shows that his check was cashed on 8/11, but that doesn't mean it wasn't submitted on time. There's no date on our Tier 2 application.
I mean, the staff report says it was submitted on August 10th.
August 10th of 2016,
Yes.
which would be consistent with the check that was written.
But my question is, when did the county get a copy of it? Because that's what the ordinance requires. Be done by September 7th, and I'm unclear whether that happened.
I do not have a date stamped copy. I only have what you have, which is a copy that is signed on June 25th, 2016. And I believe it is from the appellants. What was your timeline that I got, August 10th?
The one that is in the notice of intent that's in the packet was an incomplete notice of intent that I emailed to you. It was all I could find in my records. The one you have there, I believe, is the original. The one that's actually in my file there is the original signed one. Yeah, and that was, it was submitted well within the time frame.
Well, there seems to be evidence that you paid
Yeah, I
the
think it
fee.
might have been, I think it was submitted in like June with my original.
So in many cases, what we did, we were communicating with the water board. They would send us a list of parcels that had submitted an application. And it's correct that they were still reviewing them at the time, but in many cases, we had in the application packet that came in June, a copy of the water board application. Some of the applicants would submit a copy of the stamped application that they had submitted to the board as proof. In other cases, we received a list of parcels that had submitted. So we may not actually have a copy of the submitted water board packet, but we had, and I think in this case we had understood from the water board that they had made a timely filing for the Tier 2 application, but then we later received the notice that it was incomplete because of the wrong tier.
Okay, on your email timeline, you state that you submitted your initial Tier 2 on 8/10,
Okay.
and then on 9/13, you got the letter asserting Tier 3. So it appears though that within a 6-day period, they were getting back to you saying, no, you need to submit Tier 3, and that was in 2016?
1 second. That's just over a month. 8
So
10, 8
then
10,
you
9.
state that in October, you submitted the Tier 3. Is that the one that you submitted to us today that's all signed?
Yes.
And the water board says they don't have it, correct?
Michael Parker has no information on my file prior to my talking to him a month ago.
Okay.
He literally has nothing.
Not even the original application.
No, he has the original application.
Okay.
But no. I mean, I don't know. I can't make any assumptions about why that is. I'm not at the water board. But I know I filed my initial tier 2 well within time, and I believe Madeline has, I just saw it, the original signed copy of it over there. I don't believe that's ever been a contention of the county that I didn't get my original tier 2 submission in on time and paid for.
So, for me, okay, I think we're done with rebuttal unless you have anything new and you have more questions.
I have a question for staff. What throws me is that this whole thing, staff report starts off by saying on July 11th, 2016, Leslie Denham Newman submitted an application. June 30th was the deadline for these applications.
Yes. But on June 30th, we were not registering people. We were taking in the applications, and then we called them to set up appointments for
Okay,
the
so
following
it was
2 weeks.
submitted, but you didn't note it as
We
having been submitted.
date stamped them when they came in and paid their fees. So he came in
So
for...
anyhow, there's no question about his original application being late.
It was a timely filing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
I have a question of the planning director. The ordinance requires that the registrant demonstrate compliance with the water board regulations by providing documentary evidence satisfactory to the planning director of either of the following, and one of them is a copy of the notice of intent and so forth. Putting aside the later, the 13 September notice from the water board saying it's incomplete because it's wrong tier, was there a timely demonstration by the applicant of filing prior to September 7th satisfactory to the planning director?
I think the issue falls with the complete application, again, because this is a notice of incomplete NOI.
Well, I'm putting that aside. What I'm trying to figure out is, since you apparently don't have a date stamped or signed dated copy
The
of his
original.
original tier 2, but there appears to be evidence that he submitted it in August because he has some, what appears to be financial documents showing he paid his fee. My question is, putting aside the later notice, was there a timely filing with the water board? And provision of evidence satisfactory to the planning director that he did it?
We were satisfied that he had filed with the water board for the tier 2 based on the application, the unfiled copy of the application that was submitted with his application packet in July, and our correspondence with the water board as they gave us, the list of those that had submitted, those who did not. So we didn't actually have a document that said, and you have to, go back to over a year ago when we were, inundated with all of this paperwork and just we couldn't even keep up with it to know, did we have it? I mean, we had 740 commercial applications and we were lucky to get to, 20 a week. On September 7th, did we go through and check to make sure everyone had it? No, we did not. As we were processing, did we have the information to demonstrate that they had submitted? Yes, we did.
So if the water board hadn't said, no, you're tier 3, you wouldn't have
It would
a
have been
problem.
fine, yeah.
It would have been fine.
Okay, so the trouble starts with the notice dated September 13th, 2016, that the NOI has been determined to be in fact incomplete because it should have been tier 3.
And this gets us to sort of the process that Commissioner Lattice referred to or Commissioner Pacelli, where we did work with the applicants. If they had been notified they had filed for the wrong tier and they were making an effort to correct that, then we would say, okay, you're working with the water board, there's some miscommunication as to the proper tier, but as long as you're working forward to make those corrections, then we would consider you in compliance. In this case, again, the first notice went out, we assumed they were working with them, but by the time the second notice came out, and then there was no response from either the applicant or the water board after that time period that the water board gave Mr. Denham Newman, the timeframe to respond, that's when we denied it, because we had no record of him ever having responded, and nothing from the water board that said he had responded.
But now, as of today, we have some evidence that he did in fact fill out a Tier 3 application back in October of last year, and everybody that needed to sign it, signed it. And it's hard for me to understand why he would go to all that trouble and then not submit it to the water board. Why would anybody do that? And he tells us that he did. And based upon what he's telling us, he was told by Trey Sherrill that there was no point in submitting all the other documentation that was required for Tier 3 at that time because they were backed up. I think it's understandable why he didn't do anything. It seems to be a long period of time, yes. But based upon what I'm seeing here, it's not reasonable, I think, for him to have acted the way he did, because he thought the water board would get back to him when they could deal with him. And from the planning department standpoint, hearing nothing and knowing nothing of any of this, it's understandable why it was denied.
And I still go back to September 19th email. I don't know how we get around that. That permitting process is still open. The language that Mr. Parker used could have been better. But the final analysis, the last sentence, we can move forward with the permitting process. I think he's met all the rules. I think, unlike many of the previous applicants, Mr. Denham Newman has, in fact, done a very good job of keeping track of everything. It would have been a lot better if he had gone ahead and paid the money and done the contracts earlier. But I think you have done it. I think you have kept the door open. That's my opinion.
Well, and also, I think it's the county's interest as well as the water board's interest that the water board protections do apply and will apply. I mean, one of our major concerns with cannabis grows is the pollution of streams and the pollution of the ground and this sort of thing. And so my feeling is similar to what's been stated by Commissioner Wooster and Commissioner Bocelli. The water board is overwhelmed, and this applicant has been keeping up the chain of communication, trying to. It's been kind of one-sided, but I'm not criticizing the planning department for doing what it did, knowing what it did at the time it did it, if that all makes sense.
So I'm hearing at least 3 votes to grant the appeal.
I'm not done,
Okay.
because I think that as we continue to deliberate, it makes people think about other things. I read this initially, and I read it, and I read it, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be one that I'm probably going to overturn. But as I sit here today and the evidence comes in, I'm struggling because on September 16th, he was noticed that he didn't meet Tier 2. He needed to comply with Tier 3. He fills out an application for Tier 3. Supposedly, the water board tells him, of which I have no fact, that go ahead and submit your application. Don't pay the fee. I'm struggling with that. Don't worry about getting the biological assessments done. I struggle with that. These are big deals to me. We are looking at a waterway. We are looking at, he has gone and grown for well over a year without complying with the water board, without getting all of these assessments done. And the biggest concern that we have is protecting our water right now. And so I totally was willing to say, okay, I get this. But I guess where I don't get it is when June 26th rolls around. I mean, seriously, this is serious business for me. I would have taken my application, I would have drove to Sacramento. I would have said, here's my $20,000, what do you need me to do? Don't deny me, don't let my county know I didn't follow through for an entire year. I'm struggling with that because this is, the minute we rule this way, the Water Board doesn't have the same ordinance we do. They have their own set of standards at the state level. We have our standards at the county level. I don't care what the Water Board does and how they maintain their stuff. I care about our county. I care about liability to our county when we don't rule consistent on our ordinance and follow through with it. So, for me, he didn't follow through with our county ordinance. When you get a notice in September of 2016, and I'm sitting here in October of 2017, and no follow-through was done, I'm concerned. That's an issue for me. So as much as I thought I was going to be able to overturn after I get all this evidence here today, I can't. That's my position, and so that's where I'm at.
I think the difference in your position and my position is that I believe that the applicant has satisfied his burden of proof. I believe that he did submit the Tier 3 application. I do believe that he was told by the Water Quality Control Board that right now all you have to do is submit this and we'll work it out. You don't have to do the fee or the other thing. I believe the applicant has satisfied his burden of proof that under the facts of this specific case, it's
Okay, I would go with that. If you had shown me today that he submitted that Tier 3 in October, and the Water Board acknowledged today that they had it last year, that they had it 3 months ago in June when he was notified, 2 different times the Water Board asked for that Tier 3, and they have no evidence in their file. We have no evidence in our file. So that's where I'm struggling. If he had showed up here today and handed me his Tier 3 stamped, accepted by the state, I'd back him 100% right now.
Well, I think, now whether it was lost in the mail or whatever, I do believe that nobody's going to go to all the trouble of filling out the form that he's been requested to do by the Water Quality Control Board and not submit it. Now, I take the extra step of sending an extra copy in and saying, please send me back a stamped received copy. There's no requirement that you do that.
I agree with you up to a point. I think that his intention was to turn in an application. I think the reason we were that, there was also a fee that was supposed to be turned in with that application, and so I would hold off turning in an application if I knew I had to pay that fee until I had that money.
But he'd been told, if we believe the applicant, he'd been told that he need not submit the fee at that time.
Not in June.
Not,
In
No, I'm
June.
talking about
Okay, but
the Trey Sherrill.
we're talking about a progression.
at the
October,
time-
he could have been told, I believe him. In June, I believe they were looking for Tier 3 and money and that contract that he went out and got 3 months later. So that's where I'm struggling is once June got here of 2017, you are, I want CEQA, I want environmental protections, I'm protecting, you are Mr. Environmental, and I appreciate that. And here we are sitting next to a waterway.
Yes,
And you are not fighting for the fact that that report was not done, that contract wasn't contracted over a year ago, and we weren't doing something to protect that water?
I want it to be done, and I want it to be done now. And if we deny this application, I'm not, human nature being as
Is there
it
any
is,
reason
I'm
we
not
can't-
convinced that it will be done.
Is there any reason we can't modify the resolution to require proof that he submitted the Tier 3 application and the fee within a certain amount of time? A month or less?
I don't need a month.
The contract, I mean, I don't know how backed up the
Yeah, I mean,
experts are.
I can satisfy the requirements immediately. You know, I can satisfy, I can pay the fee, I can hire the environmental consultant immediately.
But you don't have to submit the report with the application?
As I understand it from Michael Parker, as long as I'm moving forward. you know. And from the environmental consultant, some of those surveys can't be done until the spring anyway. So there's some of the site survey and like geological and like assessment of the grading and stuff can be done now, but for the biological site assessment, looking for protected species, cannot be done until the spring.
And I very much want that to be done.
So the question regarding essentially a time frame to comply, this is an appeal hearing. It's not a, something we'd grant, put conditions on a permit. If you were to grant the appeal, he would still need to comply, and we still continue the review of the application. I think a strong admonition that this should be taken care of immediately would send the message that it needs to, and then if he doesn't, we would end up denying it again for probably the same reasons for noncompliance with the water board. But I don't think we can condition the granting of an appeal on, with certain timing.
But you can keep an eye on this.
We will certainly keep an eye on it. My recommendation maybe at this point in time would be to poll the commission to see which way you want to go with this. If the majority of the commission wishes to grant the appeal, I would recommend that we table it to later in the meeting so that we can redraft the resolution along those lines, unless there's some language that the commissioner already has that would substitute for the resolution for denial.
Okay.
Well, can I say a few more things?
No, I'd like to take a quick break. It's 11 o'clock. Can we take a 10-minute break and come back? Sure. Thank you. Back to order. Okay, so we ended with Commissioner Wooster wanting to speak.
Yeah. It's clear to me that his initial NOI was timely, having been submitted in August of 2016. And if that were all there was to the story, the planning director would have been satisfied with the demonstration that he had complied with the urgency ordinance and the water board rules. Then we have the September 13, 2016 notice of denial, both based on both size and distance to a water body. And it's fairly clear to me this should have been a Tier 3 application from the beginning. And if you just look at the form for the NOI, all of the area disturbed or occupied should have been included, and it's clear it was over an acre. So it was off the track to begin with. Then we have the discussions with Trey Sorrell in September of 2016, but we have no emails regarding them, no other documentation regarding them, exactly what was said. It appears that there may have been a Tier 3 application submitted in October of 2016, but there is no documentary proof that that was done, other than the fact that it was in fact filled out, and it would have made sense to submit it. Then the second notice comes down in June 27th of this year, again, based on both sides and distance from the water body. And there are no emails, there is no record of anything happening. From June 27th until after the denial by the planning department of September 7th. The first emails are September 19th of this year. And it does seem to me that once that June 27th email landed, or notice of denial landed, that this should have been taken care of. It actually should have been taken care of back when the original application was submitted, because it was just not correct. And so if you're looking for a poll, my view is that this appeal, and it's a close one, should be denied.
Can you turn your microphone on, please?
I'm going to stick with my original opinion. I can't I don't understand why it wasn't turned in, or why there's no record of it being turned in to either the water board or the county. I'm going to stick with my original decision.
Well, I think the directors indicated that the original NOI met our rules, and on the second NOI, the September 19th email from Michael Parker, to me, satisfies every possible problem with that. Yes, there is no specific written proof that he submitted it, but the actual application is there, dated and signed, and Michael Parker, the water board says he satisfied the second notice of incomplete. After we receive the documentation, we can move forward. He has left it open. Mr. Tenant Parker submitted the first one on time. I think the appeal should be granted. Yes, I agree wholeheartedly with the director's indication that if the appeal is granted, that there should be immediate follow-up to make sure that the fee is paid and that the environmental contracts, engineering contracts are completed or at least signed off. Signed, not signed off.
Well, I agree with Commissioner Bocelli, and I think that where we might have some differences is really on whether the applicant has satisfied his burden of proof. I believe he has. I believe, as he said, that he tried to contact Michael Parker numerous times, and that Michael Parker eventually did apologize for not returning his calls. I believe that the applicant, and that would then fill that area of documentary inactivity between June and whatever it was, September. I believe that he did submit. Well, first, I believe that he was told by Trey Sherrill that he could just submit kind of a placeholder application without paying the fee and without the other documents, while they worked out their differences. And I do believe that he has submitted a document. The owner has said, yes, I signed that document last year, and I believe that he did submit the document, that it somehow has been lost somewhere in the Water Quality Control Board. So the applicant does have the burden of proof. I believe that he has satisfied that burden of proof in meeting the standard that the planning director has stated, as far as if there is a continuous attempt to keep things current with the Water Quality Control Board, that we will not deny on the basis of the lack of, on the September 7th date basis. So it's just a matter of satisfying the burden of proof, and I think he has.
Okay. I don't think the burden of proof has been satisfied. I think that what was satisfied was the September 7th date was met completely. He filled out his application, he turned it in. There was some confusion over Tier 3, understandably. I get that. There was confusion through this whole process. But then he was notified, and he says he turned in a new Tier 3. When he turned in the Tier 3, even though somebody at the water board said you don't have to pay the fee, he knew that there were things that needed to be done with Tier 3, the biological, the cultural, all of that. No steps were taken to complete anything for an entire year. Then, on June 27th, he was given 30 days. He still did not comply. On June 27th, he knew they did not have his Tier 3 report that he thinks he submitted in October. So if that form on October was stamped and said, received by the Water Board, received by Calaveras County, the $20,000 fee is paid, I'd say he complied. But the fact that he did not comply with our ordinance by continuing the process of following through with getting that taken care of, a lot of forgiveness was given on the way that our land was treated through this process. A lot of permits were given after the grading was done and damage was done to the land. And for me, it's very serious. And for me, if we are going to do this, we're going to do it right. And getting this taken care of was important. And when you're next to water, it's important. That report should have been done a year ago. He shouldn't have had to have had another notice in June that he ignored for 30 days, and then they had to tell him he was denied. So the burden of proof is, if he had jumped through hoops starting in June to get this done and not waited, and here we are in October and he still has not paid the fee, he still has not gotten the report done, now he can't do it until spring, so now he's 2 years into this because no follow-through was done originally. That's bothersome for me. So I am not going to, I'm going to go with the planning department's recommendation. So at this point, I think we're ready to have a reading. Unless there's changes to the resolution that anybody here needs to make.
Am I afforded the opportunity to speak?
No, because the hearing is now closed, so we're going to be voting, and then the next opportunity is going to be if you appeal it to the supervisors, and that'll give you time to get an attorney before you get before them, too.
Great.
So are there any changes to the resolution? Everybody's good? Okay, we'll take the recommendation, please.
So staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt Resolution 2017-088 denying Appeal 2016-943, thereby upholding the Planning Director's denial of cannabis cultivation registration 2016-943.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, motion carries 3-2. Peter, you want to?
So this action is final, and let's appeal to the Board of Supervisors within 15 calendar days from today's date.
Okay, going on to item number 4, 2016-677, appeal by Stephen Koba. And Miguel, you're going to do this one?
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Before I jump into this, I wanted to point out that Stephen Koba did submit an email to me requesting a continuance, which I forwarded to the Planning Commission on Monday.
Okay, looking for the email. Point out the reason for asking, please.
The way I interpret the email is that Mr. Koba did not retain a lawyer and his consultant until he was sure of what the Board of Supervisors were going to do, whether to ban or regulate. But since the meeting was continued to the following week, then he didn't, his consultant and his lawyer didn't have time to prepare.
Is the applicant here today?
I'm not sure.
Mr. Koba, are you here?
It doesn't look like it.
So,
Can we have a summary judgment?
yeah, right. So the problem that I see here is that personally, I prefer to keep this going. I don't want to do continuance after continuance and keep dragging this out. But the problem that I have is the last time that we held a hearing under these same exact circumstances, it was sent back to us by the Board of Supervisors. So, we probably need to be having the discussion if the Board of Supervisors didn't want us to have a hearing if they weren't present, but what we're doing is setting precedents for anybody that doesn't want to have their continuance granted to not show up, and then we don't have the hearing. So, dear Board of Supervisors, you put us in a position here. Help us.
Well, I'm concerned that we did not grant the previous request for continuance, and then just because the appellant did not show up, I think we clearly advised him that it would be up to you to make the decision whether to continue it or not. Is that clear? Is that correct, Miguel?
Yes, I definitely emailed Mr. Koba back and explained to him that it's going to be, that the hearing will happen today, or that it's scheduled for today, and that the Planning Commission would make a determination this morning whether to allow it or not.
So I would like to just make a suggestion here that we hold the hearing. When we rule one way or the other, if we rule in favor of the planning department, then I'd like to send a recommendation back to the Board of Supervisors explaining to them that we did our job and that that they need to have their own hearing and process it with him present. It's not our fault that he didn't show up. So I'd like to have the hearing and express to the Board of Supervisors that we can't continue to allow people to disrespect the Planning Commission, not show up, and that they missed their opportunity here for the hearing. If they wanted to pay the additional $500 and go before the supervisors, then it's their obligation to hold their own hearing, and they have the right to overrule us anyway. So all we are is a recommendation.
You can include a copy of the email stating that he was told he should have been here today.
And I'm going to go with Mr. Commissioner Laddish is holding the email that I looked over his shoulder dated October 23rd, which missed our procedural deadline. Correct? No?
Let's see.
That was Monday, so that was.
Oh, okay.
The other reason that the commission sent it back was there was an allegation of new information, which the board would have, if they wanted to consider that new information, would have to have referred it back to the commission anyway. So.
Do they pay a second fee when it gets referred back to us?
No.
I will ask county council, who sits with the Board of Supervisors, that if there is an issue with, if the planning commission is inclined to deny the continuance and that piece is appealed, I will ask Ms. Stedfeld to get clear direction from the board and clarify whether it's specific to the case that's before them, or if they're trying to send a message back to the planning commission about their views on continuance.
Well, I'd also like to point out that the main ground for this is, well, gee, the Board of Supervisors might render this moot. Under the current circumstances, the decision as to what the county's going to do as to commercial cannabis growth is put off again. I mean, this ground would last until the Board of Supervisors finally makes a decision as to what they're going to do. And that's gaming the system, I think. I understand why they wouldn't want to pay their attorneys and stuff to prepare for a meeting that might be rendered, or a decision that might be rendered moot. But we're coming to work every day, or every week, it seems. I think we could get a request for a continuance based on the same grounds that, gee, the Board of Supervisors might settle this the next time.
Well, they still get their due process when they go before the Board of Sup. So I'd like to continue having the hearing if you are all okay with that. Can I please get a motion to continue this?
Wait a minute.
What?
To not continue.
To not continue. I mean to have the hearing today.
Yes.
So moved. Thank you. Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Public comment?
Where we going?
Oh, thank you, Colleen. I'm so glad you're here.
Don't want to violate due process.
No, I love you. Thank you.
Just kidding. Colleen Platt, My Valley Springs. I agree with Commissioner Laddish. The reason given that they didn't want to hire an attorney yet because they weren't sure of how things were going is totally invalid. You file an appeal, you should hire an attorney. You made the commitment to file an appeal, take up the planning department's time, you should hire your attorney. Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, it does state they have an attorney. It's just
They
they
just
didn't
couldn't
want
be
to,
prepared.
they didn't want to
Waste their
pay
time.
the attorney for preparing the full.
Oh, they didn't want to pay him. They have him, but they didn't want to pay him.
They have-
Oh, that makes even more sense, right?
Is there any other public comment? Okay, then we will close public comment, bring it back to the board, and now can we vote? I had a motion and a second. Who was the second?
I'll second that.
Actually, it's the applicant's motion.
Oh, that's-
No, this is us motioning. We never voted on having the hearing today or having a continuance. So we were going to vote, but then I forgot public comment, so we had to go back.
I think that the motion by Karen was to deny the request for continuance.
I'll second it if I haven't seconded it.
You did 3 times, thank you. So all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we're going forward.
All right, so good morning to the Planning Commission.
Good morning,
Miguel Contreras with the Planning Department. Today I'm here to present Appeal 2016-677. Real quick, the project, the parcel is located at 1129 Doe Road in McCallum Hill. The reason for denial is a violation of 17.95.165.n.7 for earth movement activities on a portion of the parcel that is used for cultivation beyond the May 10th, 2016 deadline. Just real quick, as a visual, I have a PowerPoint presentation. It's only a few slides. This this current aerial image is from May 31st, 2016. This is the condition of the parcel. This is June 28, 2017. Just comparing these two images led the planning department to believe that earth movement had occurred beyond the May 10th deadline. On May 30th of 2017, code compliance had a inspection on the parcel. At that time, they instructed the registrant to acquire an as-built grading permit. At that point, however, code compliance had no knowledge that any other work had been done beyond the May 10th deadline, seeing how aerials for 2017 had not been published yet by either Google Earth or our own county aerials. As you can see from this comparison between these two images, the top right one is May 31st or May 30th by code compliance. The bottom one is image that was submitted with the original registration dated May 9th, 2016. I chose these two images as comparison because they share a similar vantage point. As you can see on the May 9th image of 2016, the terrain looks more organic, more mountain-like, whereas compared to the 2017 image, you could clearly see how terraces have been developed. And just a quick little history. This is what the parcel looked like on June 9th. This is our county aerials. This is what it looked like on August 20th of 2016. And this is what it looks like as of June 2nd, 2017. So,
One photo for a second, please. Oops.
oh,
Forward.
one.
There you go. Okay, now go forward. Thank you.
And I'd just like to point out that in his appeal letter, the appellant does state that the grading and earth movement had started on the parcel before May 10th, but due to mechanical failures with their heavy equipment, the earth movement had to continue beyond the May 10th deadline. That's all I have. If there's any questions.
That was it? Would you like to start? We don't have...
Yes.
Well, let me just make absolutely sure we have nobody here representing this appeal. Okay.
Yes, if we could go to the aerials of May 31, 2016, and June 28th of 2017. Can you, that's the first one.
This is May 31st, yes.
Talk about the double.
Oh, I don't have them side by side.
You don't have them side by side?
No.
It is not obvious to me that there's been more earth moving when I look at those two photographs. And since you can't put them both up at the same time, I guess it might be difficult to point out where it's taking place. Can you try anyway, maybe looking at the latest one? What area do you
If
think?
you give me like 2 minutes, I could certainly put them together.
Well, what we're after is the grading, right? I mean, you also, I forget now.
It's the reason is for earth movement on a portion of the parcel that is used for cultivation beyond the May 10th deadline.
Yeah, and are you saying that more area was cultivated?
Not more area.
That's
Just
what I
the
want to
tiers were developed, correct?
Yeah,
That the tiers were developed, that
Right.
earth movement continued beyond May 10th.
okay.
The ground level photos pretty much show
Yeah.
the terracing.
Well, that's not obvious to me either, because it doesn't look to me like the two ground level photos are exactly the same spot.
They're not exactly in the same spot, they're similar, just based on the background on the mountains and the trees.
But if I look at the one of May 30 of 2017, it looks to me like it shows more area to the right, if you will, than the one of May 9th of 2016.
Let me get the images together, that way I could see what you're talking about.
If you look at the various pots, though, they're lined up fairly level with groups of three all the way down. And then there's blank dirt, and there's more three. They've obviously terraced between those two dates. They were not terraced in the May 9th of 16. Pots are just laying there. Some of them are even at an angle. So terracing has been added later.
It seems to me that although I have a hard time matching specific trees between the 5/30/2017 shot and the 5/9/2016 shot, just overall, from the aerials, one has the pots at a random spots, as Commissioner Bocelli pointed out, and the other one is all in line, consistent with the 5/30/2017 ground shot. So I have no problem finding that the terraces have been added, but grading has been done.
Commissioner Wooster, is that good enough, or?
I just don't see where, from those aerials, I'm having trouble seeing that there was more area graded or where earth was moved between those two pictures. If I look at the foliage around the edges, it looks about the same to me.
Well, I don't think we're worried about more area. That was the point of my question. I think we're just worried about the earth movement and grading.
Well, and those aerials, those are flat taken from above. I can't say there's earth moving between those two. Sure, the plants are configured differently. That's obvious. But that doesn't tell me that there was earth moving.
Well, you see no terracing in their 5/9/2016 ground shot. And there's obvious terracing, and the placement of the pots are consistent with the terracing in the 5/30/2017 shot. When you compare it to 5/9, it's the random plopping of these pots that is shown in the 5/31/16 aerial. So
I think the vegetation does line up. If you remember, there was something called a butte fire in between But if you look at the upper right, I'm talking about the ground level shots. The later ones, 2017 shot, there's a tree sort of in the middle left. It's obviously been burned a bit. And it's in the 2016 shot, much heavier foliage. And then to the right of it is one sticking up. And then way to the left, they seem to line up. I think they do line up. And yes, the upper right one, this 2017 shot, is a little bit closer in. But I see major terracing. That's not even a little bit of terracing.
And I think if you look at the
It's
mountains,
significant.
mountains in the distance,
I think
you can pick them out.
the question that's maybe before you here is whether or not reconfiguring, grading within the existing footprint falls under the category of grading or earth moving for the purpose of cultivation under N7. And if it's not changing the footprint, does that constitute a violation of the ordinance? Clearly, if this were new terracing outside, there wouldn't be any question about it. Our interpretation of the code was that it was to be left pretty much as it is. And if you just had cleared soil with sloping ground and that's what you're working with, that was the way it was supposed to be. In this case, it came back later and terraced that same area without expanding the footprint. That was grading or earth movement under our interpretation of the code. If you feel differently, then that would be sort of a overriding interpretation of what was the intent of the ordinance when it was adopted.
No, I would agree with your position on that. I don't think you can stay within the existing footprint and terrace where you didn't before, where it involves earth moving. So I think you're correct about that. My problem was trying to see that happened, okay?
Yeah, and our reliance on that is really the photographs that show essentially, pretty much the same area. This would be attachment 4 that shows the 2016 sloping ground and the 2017 clearly terraced, which is pretty much the same area. It's not from the exact same location, but it shows that same slope. I think that the 2016 was probably taken more from the middle of the cultivation area, where the 2017 was taken further back at the edge of the cultivation area. So it's not exactly the same, but you can clearly see that new terracing has occurred.
And I do think that if you look at the mountains in the far distance in those two photographs, it shows a slightly different angle, but that you can match up the peaks of those hills or mountains.
Can I ask a question of staff? Did you check with Public Works to see if they pulled a grading permit? Because they have hired Cal State Engineering, and Cal State Engineering is here writing a letter saying that this is going to be a topographic survey for an as-built grading plan. Do they have a permit pulled with Public Works that regards to this terracing?
To my knowledge, they haven't.
Did you check?
I don't think I have checked and confirmed it.
Kind of an important factor in this for me, because if they have hired an engineer for this grading and they've got plans and they're doing as-built and Public Works has accepted it, we have an issue. I think we may be, does anybody else see this the way that I'm seeing it?
No,
What we
not at all.
don't have is any indication
No.
from code compliance of, well, you do this and it'll all be okay. If you're thinking of the same case that I'm thinking of.
We apparently don't think alike at all. Commissioner Bocelli just made that very clear.
Well, it's just that.
I mean,
that
the
what-
word all is in the UO, right? All,
Yes.
grading and earth movement, period. End of discussion. It's terraced, it's wrong,
In his letter,
deny the appeal.
in his letter, he states that he started it prior to May 10th, but he started it because of equipment breakdown.
But if he has a grading permit for this, we have a problem.
Why?
Because then he did it legally with a permit.
That's like saying getting the water board retroactively
No,
is okay.
you're missing my point.
At the At the time of code compliance inspection, he didn't.
He was not doing the
He was
engineering.
not. That's
Okay.
what
And
prompted.
code compliance didn't say hire someone to fix your
That,
grading?
yeah, so on 530, code compliance said, hey, you need to get an as-built grading permit. That's what prompted Cal State Engineering to send that letter after May 30th.
Where's code compliance's notice in here?
I didn't include it because it's irrelevant to code compliance's thing, in my opinion. It's grading beyond the deadline.
I think it is important because it
If they said,
makes the resolution more solid.
if they said that we, that code compliance said, if you do all this, why, you can get your permit from the county, why, then we've got a real problem.
Yeah,
So
definitely. And the only thing is that code compliance did not have access to these aerials. All these aerials are June. The inspection happened on May 30th, so there's no way of code compliance to know if change had occurred beyond May 10th. You see what I'm saying?
I am not understanding.
Well,
If you
why
said the
didn't
code,
code compliance write them up?
if you said code compliance said you have to get an as-built grading permit, what else did they say when they said that? It's real important for us that we get the code compliance on-site report and any communications from code compliance to the applicant.
Commissioner Chili wants to go along. I'm going to. I'm working on it. Okay. You want to just stay here and work through lunch? You will too. All right, I don't know where we're at. Well, I think we're waiting for code compliance stuff.
This is the information we have from code compliance. I'm just sort of reviewing it just quickly, and I'll pass it around. There was a series of emails from Tom Swats, the code compliance officer, to planning department on July 10th.
Of this year.
I've got to say that I'm looking over your shoulder, Peter, and that picture of grading looks completely different than what's before us. Are those code compliance pictures?
So these are aerial imaging taken by the Sheriff's Department on July 6th. That picture there was taken in May
30th.
On May 30th, so a little over a month later.
This year.
It's 2017.
Okay, I want to use caution here because we've chosen to go forward without an appellant here and have this hearing. So I think what I'd like to do is call for a recess for lunch, have them make copies of this documentation so that all of us can review it, so that we can't be accused of due process. We didn't review everything before us. So let's call it lunchtime, come back at 12:45, and when we come back, can we have copies of that?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you.